China aims to peak carbon emissions before 2030 and reach carbon neutrality by 2060. Harmony between humanity and nature has been defined as one of the 5 major features of the Chinese path to modernization. In this episode of The Talk, we invite 2 environmental conservationists to share with us their stories in China.
I'm very lucky to have been able to visit China so often. It's a privilege to be able to come here and work with my wonderful colleagues here at WildAid. I would say that even though I've been here for 15 times, I'm not an expert in China. That said, obviously you notice differences as you return to a place like Beijing so often. One of the things that I've noticed, aside from the fact that the air is cleaner, is that there's a change in the way that people think about the environment over the last 10 years that I've been coming to China. I think a lot of that has to do with certain governmental policies. It started with ecological civilization and people starting to understand harmony with nature. And then the dual carbon goal has come out, which really puts a number and a numerical goal on that idea of ecological civilization. So between those 2 things, I think you can see a difference in the way people are wanting to lead their lives here in China.
My first trip was in 1989. Some English friends of mine had been just a little bit before that. They came in 85 and 86, just as China was opening to foreigners. And they went to Beidahe in Hebei, and they saw lots of birds. So they told me what they'd seen and they showed me some photographs. When I was young in the UK, these were dream birds, relatively common birds in China, in eastern China lands. So I went with my girlfriend at the time and a friend, and we were so lucky. I just finished at university, and I spent 3 months looking at birds at Beidahe, and it was great. It was better than I expected it to be. I've made 100,000 recordings. This one I made just a few days ago, maybe a week ago, in the local park, and it's Indian cuckoo. These things sing. They arrive in mid-May. Some of them sing till about mid-July. They're just coming to the end of their season. China's obviously a vast country with so many diverse habitats. You've got the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau, high altitude plateau. You've got deserts in Shenzhen. You've got coastal mudflats in just three hours drive from Beijing in Chaofeidian in Hebei that have phenomenal numbers of birds on migration.
Mangroves are an incredibly important ecosystem, not only for climate change, but also for biodiversity and natural disaster resilience. So from a biodiversity perspective, the mangroves in Shenzhen are home to not only a large population of birds like egrets and herons and spoonbills and fish, but also to river and sea otters, also wild cats. These are not the type of biodiversity that is usually found in such a large mega city like Shenzhen. So for that reason, that project is extremely important. But in addition to the biodiversity, this ecosystem provides protection from natural disasters like typhoons, floods, storm surges, and even tsunamis. And lastly, they can be an important source of carbon sequestration, so helping to pull carbon and CO2 emissions out of the air and store them in the soil. Compared to tropical rainforests, mangroves sequester 10 times more carbon per acre. And so they're vital for our ability to solve climate change. So protecting these ecosystems is not only good for the people in the city and the animals, it's also good for people around the world. What makes the Shenzhen location so unique is that it is a green belt that not only protects the city and provides biodiversity and vibrancy to the area, but it is located in a city of 15 or 20 million people. And that is something that is unique and not seen anywhere else.
In the modern day, with global warming and climate change, bird distribution's changing very fast. One of the commonest birds in Beijing now is light-vented bulbul, Baitobe. It's really common. If we were to walk outside for 5 minutes, you would hear light vented bulbul. 35 years ago, there were no light vented bulbuls in Beijing. Now there will be hundreds of thousands. They've come from the south.
The dual carbon goals are incredibly ambitious, and that's a very good thing, because on the issue of climate change, that's exactly what we need. We need ambition from our national governments around the world. We have a saying at WildAid, which is that conservation is a team sport, meaning it takes all of us, a whole of society approach. Not only governments, but people, corporations, NGOs. And when it comes to WildAid, the place that we like to focus our energy, the way that we like to do our work, is to support individuals in finding their role on climate action. So in order to achieve net zero by 2060, not only will the government of China have to do its part, but also the people. Now, there was a recent survey or study that came out from the Chinese Academy of Sciences that said 53% of all emissions in China are due to lifestyles and consumptions of individual people. So that tells you how much of a role individuals have to play. And the same thing is true all around the world.
Most people on the street in China have no interest or no knowledge of the birds or the wildlife. They just have no interest or knowledge about how special China is, you know. We had a fabulous series on TV in the UK during the 2008 Olympic Games. It was broadcast, it was filmed just before that by the BBC, called Wild China. It was a series of 6 programs, and it was just jaw-dropping. By then I knew China well, I knew China's wildlife, but this film was just awesome. It was just awesome. Just showed how varied and how rich China is. I think it's important to encourage an interest in wildlife and birds, and the best way to do that is to start with young kids, you know, to enthuse to young kids, to get the message through that they are very lucky, that there are so many things to see in China, and we have to start appreciating urgently how lucky we are and what we've got, and we have to start preserving it.
WildAid is not only supporting through our large-scale campaigning, we're also providing tools like our Public Climate Action Handbook to help people find the next steps in their climate journey. But we couldn't do this alone. We see this work as directly supporting the work of the Ministry of Ecology and Environment, and particularly in providing more details and tools on their 10 recommendations for citizens to live a more green life. So WildAid will play its role in providing awareness, motivation, and tools for change, and the government will also play its role, and together, hopefully, we can solve this crisis.
I've been working for a long time, gathering information about the birds of Beijing. We now know what species are here in Beijing. There's a good list of the birds of Beijing. You know, Beijing has an extreme climate. The summers are very hot, the winters are very cold. So they typically has different birds in summer to the winter. We don't know much about where they come from or where they go or when they breed. We're starting to learn, but the information's still not there. So I've been working on this book since I've been coming to China, effectively.
I would say first that I'm very optimistic that countries are able to work together on climate change, not only because we must, but because of the individuals that I've met in my own climate journey. I'm very optimistic that China and the United States, and particularly Europe, can work together to solve the climate crisis. Not only because of ambitious targets like the dual carbon goal being set by governments, but because of the cooperation that I've seen among individual people.